Welcome to another video, but what I want you to do, because I don't know who the audience is, if you have children, if they're, say, age 8 or under, plug their ears, send them away. I'm going to give you 10 seconds or so to do that because I'm going to say some things which might be kind of shocking. All right, hopefully they're out of the area. Here's the shocking detail. Santa Claus doesn't exist. What? Don't you love the myths we tell ourselves? Santa Claus is pretty harmless. I grew up with it. I also perpetuated it a bit when my children were younger. And it's pretty harmless, but yet at times we do that. Well, Santa's going to know if you're naughty or nice, so you better be good, or you won't get a present, or all of these different myths that go along with it. Overall, are they harmful? Probably not. But what are some of the other myths that we have in our life? And by myth, I don't mean some sort of lie. I don't mean some kind of fairy tale that doesn't exist. And I'm not talking about rainbows and unicorns. But we have these collective stories that maybe at times work for us, and indeed they do work, or for us as a culture or a society. But how specific are they? How specific do we need to follow them? Case in point, this is being taped the day after Joe Biden's inauguration. I had heard it said that this was the first inauguration where there wasn't a peaceful transfer of power from one president to the other, and that's the hallmark of democracy. Well, as of today, the United States and democracy and government is still functioning. So is that a bit of a myth? And I'm not saying what happened in the last few weeks is somehow acceptable. There's too many dynamics in it to sort that out. But it's a myth that it looks like doesn't follow reality. So today we're going to hear from a person, a friend of mine named Jody, and I asked her a bunch of questions ahead of time, and she kind of burst my bubble. She's going to share her story, and I want you to listen to the story, but also to think about the myths we tell ourselves about life, or about how we cope with life, or how we deal with the events of life. And what works for me may not work for you. What works for Jody may not work for all other people. But does that somehow mean that spirituality or faith, or however we wish to practice that which helps us get out of bed each day, is somehow wrong? Is there room in our myths for diversity?
Well, my name is Jody, and Tim asked me to talk a little bit about my life experience. When I was in my 20s, my mother passed away, and before she was ready to pass away, she asked each of us 3 kids to make sure that we all went to church because she wanted to see us in heaven. At the time, sounded great, but as I got older, now this is 20 years since, that promise didn't seem to be as easy as she made it seem, or maybe as practical either. I have MS, multiple sclerosis, and I don't always have the energy to go to church or interact with people, and sometimes it's just not a good idea. So I got to thinking about what she said, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought I can still be a good person without going to a physical building. So throughout my life, I've developed kind of a coping strategy, or I guess just outlook on life, where I've just tried to really focus on being a good person and doing everything that I learned when I grew up going to church. I'm still hoping to see her in heaven one day. That's what my brother and sister and I dream to happen. I just haven't gone to church. You might have to. So nobody really knows or thinks that their life is going to be easy. They always hope that it's going to be easy. Very early in my life, my dad instilled into my brain that life isn't fair. And I don't think any true words have been spoken. So we've had a lot of death in my family. And I was diagnosed with MS the final semester of college right after my now husband proposed. So there are a lot of things that didn't go right. There's still things that don't go right. Over time, I've learned to deal with things in a way that I believe is positive. I don't focus on the negative. I try to look forward and not back. I try not to hold grudges. That sometimes is impossible. But really, I don't like to surround myself with toxic events, toxic people, or just things that I don't feel are good for my spirit. I find comfort in the outdoors. I feel like I'm closer to my family. I feel like somehow they can see me down here from wherever they are. And I think since I started doing things outside, I have become a much more calm person and much happier person. And I think my husband would attest to that. Things are never easy, and you're never going to know what to expect. I go to bed every night wondering what tomorrow will bring, like we all do. I just have added stress because maybe tomorrow I won't be able to walk. That's hard to deal with. It's hard to think about. But over time, you've got to let it go. I guess I just let it. I mean, there's not a whole lot I can do about it anyway. So it's not worth wasting my life worrying about something that may or may not happen.
I guess it's time to dig a little deeper into that conversation or the sharing that Jody did about her story and the myths. Part of the reason I'm coming to you in a different setting and at a different place is that the cold of the last time caused some technical difficulties. And so it's 8 days later from the conversation that Jody shared, and the federal government's still running. The peaceful transition of power that many said didn't happen has not caused our democracy to fall into chaos. If we mine into that myth, that collective story we agree on, to help keep our society running, where did it come from? Number one, if you think about the word power, most of us want it and don't want to give it up. Historically, those who settled and then brought about the United States of America lived in monarchies or kingdoms, or if you want to say dictatorships, where power was often gotten in wars or in coups or in military action. So when the country was established, democracy was supposed to be different. So we kind of came up with this idea that power gets transferred in a peaceful manner, that elections free and fair are what define us. And that's all well and good, but when that myth is kind of shattered for the first time, we get pretty upset and say, oh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Well, we're still here. I want us to also mine into a little bit that thing that Jody's mom said to her and her siblings about, I want you to go to church so I can see you again someday in heaven. Where did that come from? And why do we kind of perpetuate it still? And I'm not saying it's wrong. However, part of me says if we don't think about it, if we don't consider where it came from. Again, centuries ago, the church was pretty powerful. It was actually, in many ways, more powerful than the state because the two were often combined. And so, the church or the priests or those who ran the institutional church had power over their small areas, their little parishes or their little geographical county or however you wanted to define it. And one of the ways to keep order or to keep everything from falling apart, they assumed, was to tell people what they needed to do. Kind of to set up the moral compass for their little community. And oftentimes that moral compass had to do with what is right and what is wrong in the eyes of the church, or the church helped define it. So if you practice good behaviors and treated people the way they were meant to be treated or the way God wanted them to be treated, there would be rewards for that. If you chose not to, you would be doomed to hell. And that continued to be perpetuated, that good behavior meant showing up at church. There became days of obligation and other ways to say, you've got to come to church. Why? Come to worship. Why? So the church could maintain power. And not that that power was necessarily bad, but it certainly got misused. If you think back to what Jody said a little bit, part of what her mom said bothers her to this day because she doesn't go to worship or doesn't attend church for a variety of reasons. Maybe, and I think what her mother was trying to say to Jody and her siblings was, I really love you. And I'm going to miss you greatly because I'm dying. And I love you so much that I want to see you again. That there is some time post-death where we can be reunited. And I want to see you. And the way to do that, or the shorthand way of doing that, might have been, go to church and be good, and you'll go to heaven, and I will see you. Sometimes I wonder why we don't share what we feel instead of using that shorthand. Now go to church so you go to heaven. I want you to be good. I don't think most of us go out to be bad, although sometimes power and control gets pretty addictive. But how do we live with each other? What are the myths and why do we perpetuate them? Think back to Santa Claus. There were certainly times when I wasn't nice, and the gifts were still there. And finally, if you think about Christianity, the premise is that God chose to come to us. We don't do good things to go to God. God came to us, and heaven comes to us. Glimpses of it, opportunities to live at peace, to have serenity, to live fully each day, to connect with and share our feelings each day with one another. Could that not be heaven? Not some place we wait for in the hereafter, but something we enjoy and connect with and celebrate today. Well, back out to finish my snowshoeing. Thanks for watching.